speaking of Rafa, tell us about your time at the Rafa Nadal Academy. How old were you when you went there, and what's that been like for you?
Yeah, I've been there since I was 13, so it's been quite a while, and I've built so many long-lasting relationships there, and I love it there, and hence why I'm still there.
Eala just sat down and opened up about everything. Her childhood, her idols, the academy that built her, and the moment in Miami that changed her life completely. She held nothing back. And what she revealed explains exactly why this 20-year-old is already one of the most compelling stories in all of sports right now. Did you know Alexa has been training at the Rafa Nadal Academy since she was 13 years old? Drop a yes or no in the comments and tell us what surprised you most about her story.
But I just think it's a great place. So sentimental for me because I've spent all my teenage years there. And yeah, I think it was just a great experience growing up.
Let's talk about Eala the person, not just Eala the ranking number or Eala the crowd sensation, because this interview she gave in Melbourne pulled back the curtain on a story that is genuinely more interesting than most people realize. She sat down during the Australian Open and just talked about where she came from, about the people who shaped her, about what it actually felt like to stand in the middle of a Miami stadium as a wildcard qualifier and beat the world number one. About what life looks like now that she cannot walk out of the house alone in the Philippines without getting recognized. All of it. And the picture that comes together when you listen to the full conversation is of someone who has been quietly building toward this moment for most of her life with a level of clarity and intention that most athletes twice her age have not managed to develop. Start with how she even got into tennis, because the origin story is not what you would expect from someone who is now one of the most recognized faces in the sport globally.
Your start in tennis, as I understand it, is quite interesting. I believe your mum was a swimmer. You had an uncle who was a basketball player. Why did you choose tennis?
I got into tennis because of my brother. He's 3 years older and he started playing tennis. And so when it came time for me to pick up a sport, I kind of think they just threw me in with him, And yeah, I ended up loving it.
Her mother was a swimmer. Her uncle played basketball. Neither of those athletic traditions pointed toward tennis, but her brother, 3 years older, picked up a racket and started playing. And when it came time for young Alex to choose a sport, the family essentially put her in with him to see what happened. She picked it up. She loved it. And from that completely unplanned starting point, everything that followed began to take shape. She was a kid who fell into tennis almost by accident and then decided to dedicate her entire adolescence to becoming one of the best players in the world. The casual way she describes that origin is one of the most endearing things about the interview. No grand origin story. No dramatic moment where she watched a match and felt destiny calling. Just her brother playing and her tagging along. And then 20 years later, her portrait is hanging on the wall at Nike World Headquarters in Oregon. Her idols growing up tell you a lot about who she became as a player.
Who were your idols when you were growing up?
So obviously Rafa Nadal was a big one. On the girls' side, I really looked up to Maria Sharapova and Lena. And then a bit later on, Halep and Barty also, yeah.
Rafael Nadal at the top of the list, which makes complete sense given what comes next in her story. On the women's side, she looked up to Maria Sharapova and Galina Jankovic. Then later, Simona and Ashiti came into the picture. Look at that list carefully. Nadal for relentless fighting spirit and physical intensity. Sharapova for competitiveness and mental toughness under pressure. Halep for movement and consistency. Barty for tactical intelligence and the ability to beat power players with craft. That is not a random collection of favorites. That is a blueprint. And whether consciously or not, the player Eala has developed into reflex pieces of all of them. She competes hard.
She moves well.
She has shown repeatedly that she can outthink and outlast bigger, more powerful opponents. Those qualities did not appear from nowhere. They were absorbed from years of watching and admiring players who embodied them. And then there is the Rafa Nadal Academy. Because if you want to understand how a 13-year-old from the Philippines becomes a top 30 WTA player by 20, the Academy is the single most important chapter in that story. Eala has been at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain since she was 13 years old, 7 years. She has spent essentially her entire adolescence there. Every important developmental year of her life as a tennis player happened within that institution. And when she talks about it in the interview, the emotion in her description is completely genuine. She says she loves it there. She says she has built long-lasting relationships that she genuinely values. She says it is sentimental to her in a way that goes beyond just being a training facility. That matters because the Rafa Nadal Academy is not just a place with good courts and good coaches. It is a philosophy. Nadal built it around the values that defined his own career. Hard work, humility, relentless preparation, the willingness to outwork everyone else regardless of how talented you are. The Academy does not just train technique. It trains character. And the character of the player Iga reflects exactly those principles in every observable way. She came through as a junior and won the US Open Juniors title. She talks about that period with perspective that is more mature than you would expect from someone describing achievements at that age. She acknowledges the weight of expectations that comes with succeeding as a junior player and the very real challenge of translating junior success into professional results. A lot of talented juniors never make that transition successfully. The pressure, the change in competition level, the shift in lifestyle and routine, it breaks a significant percentage of players who are genuinely special at the junior stage. All says she handled that transition pretty well. And she says it with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from someone who actually did handle it well rather than someone trying to convince themselves or the interviewer of something that is not quite true. The numbers support the claim. She went from junior champion to professional tour grinder to top 100 to top 50 to top 30 in a progression that, while not perfectly linear, was always moving in the right direction. The Miami Open last year is the moment that almost every conversation about Eala eventually arrives at, and this interview is no different. She was asked about it, and her response was immediate and unfiltered. She called it the highlight of her career so far. She said everything clicked after that. She described looking back at what she accomplished in those 2 weeks and finding it genuinely difficult to believe it actually happened. She came into Miami as a wild card through qualifying. That means she was not even supposed to be in the main draw automatically based on her ranking at the time. She played her way in, and then she beat Jelena Ostapenko, a Grand Slam champion. She beat Madison Keys, who was playing essentially at home in the United States, and she beat Iga Świątek, who was the world number 1. She reached the semifinals, and the tears and the disbelief that captured in that photograph of her on court afterward, the one that Nike later put on their headquarters wall, were real. She was not performing for the cameras. She was genuinely overwhelmed by what she had just done. The ranking consequences were immediate and transformative. Her ranking roughly halved in terms of number, meaning it improved dramatically after those 2 weeks. She broke into the top 100 for the first time. That single number crossing over that threshold changed everything practical about her career. It meant automatic entry into Grand Slam main draws. It meant automatic entry into all WTA 1000 events. It meant she was no longer fighting for wild cards and qualifying spots. She was a main draw player at the biggest tournaments in the world. She describes the period after Miami as a completely new experience with eyes wide open. Everything was different. The caliber of opponent every week, the tournament she was entering, the schedule demands, the attention from sponsors, media, and fans. All of it arrived simultaneously, and she had to absorb and adjust while also continuing to compete at the highest level. She says she had some tough times last year alongside the highlights, which is honest and probably understated. Adjusting to top 100 life, while also managing the kind of fan base attention that was growing around her. The sold-out stadiums, the Filipino fans traveling internationally to see her play, the social media volume that comes with becoming a cultural phenomenon in your home country. That is an enormous amount of pressure on top of the already significant pressure of professional tennis. But she says she looks back at 2025 with so much positivity. And the results justify that framing. Top 100 broken after Miami, top 50 by end of year, top 40 earlier in 2026, world number 31 after Dubai, gold medal at the Southeast Asian Games, first Filipina to win a Grand Slam match at the US Open, first Filipina to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal, highest ranked Filipino player in history. That is a list that would define most careers entirely, and she compiled it in roughly 12 months. When asked whether all those historic firsts for Philippines tennis bring pride or pressure, her answer is more pride with a side of gratitude. She says she knows that not every player gets the platform she has, that the support behind her is a blessing, and that she tries to take it in with as much gratitude as possible. Then she adds, almost as an afterthought, that she would be lying if she said it came without any pressure at all, because of course it does. Carrying the hopes of 110 million people plus a global diaspora into every match you play is not a pressure-free experience. But the way she handles it shows exactly what 7 years at the Rafael Nadal Academy, surrounded by the philosophy of someone who competed at the absolute highest level under the most intense pressure imaginable for 2 decades, actually looks like in practice. She does not catastrophize the pressure. She does not pretend it does not exist. She acknowledges it and then redirects to what she can control, which is how she prepares and performs on the court. The section of the interview about life at home in the Philippines is worth pausing on because it reveals something specific about how completely her life has changed. She mentions that she has not been home a lot, which is the reality of being a professional tennis player whose schedule is essentially global and continuous. But when she has been home, she says things have changed, to say the least. She tries to avoid going out alone now. She says it with a laugh and frames it immediately as a blessing rather than a complaint. But read between the lines and you are hearing someone describe the experience of becoming famous in a country that expresses that recognition in very direct and very physical ways. She cannot move through the Philippines as a private person anymore. That is a significant life change for a 20-year-old who grew up moving through the world with a normal degree of anonymity. The fact that she frames it as gratitude rather than burden tells you something important about her character and about the values the Academy spent 7 years reinforcing in her. Off the court, she likes beaches, trying new restaurants, shopping, and when she's tired, which is often, catching up on movies. She had just been to St. Kilda Beach in Melbourne for the first time and admitted she has never been to Gold Coast and does not know when it might fit into her schedule. These are the details of a person who lives a very full, very demanding, very international professional life and grabs ordinary pleasures where she can find them. When asked what she learned most about herself in 2025, she paused, called it a great question, and then said she learned about her capabilities. She described watching a 40-minute compilation of her best points that the WTA put together and being genuinely surprised by how much she had improved. She said she has always believed in herself, but that executing and producing at the highest level added an extra layer of confidence that believing alone cannot give you. That is a precise and honest answer. Believing in yourself before you have done something is one thing. Believing in yourself after you have proven it to the entire world is something different and something more durable. Eala went to Miami and found out what she was actually capable of, and everything since then has been built on that knowledge, rather than just hope. The Rafael Nadal Academy gave her the foundation. Miami gave her the proof. And now, at 20 years old, world number 31, Nike Global Ambassador, front row at fashion shows, selling out stadiums in 3 different continents, she is just getting started. Eala opened up about everything. And the story behind the rankings and the crowd scenes is even more impressive than the results themselves. 7 years at the Rafael Nadal Academy built something real, and the tennis world is only now starting to fully understand what that means. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe right